Well, good morning again. Thank you. This is participatory, okay? This is not a show, although I feel like a one-woman show today. This is both of us, so wakey, wakey. So my name, like I mentioned, is Reverend Mak Percival, and I am standing in for our barefooted pastor. I feel like I should take my shoes off. I'm not, for the sake of the three people in the front row. And I'm excited because we're starting a new series. I don't know why I'm kicking it off, but you're going to be great. You're going to do fine. You got this. So we already did a series of the 5 lies about that we believe about God. We did that at the beginning of the summer. And so now we're going to flip that a little bit. And this is going to be difficult for some of us during this series, not mentioning any names, because it involves now the 5 lies that we believe about us. Which means we're going to have to do some internalizing and some processing and doing some work within ourselves to see exactly what it is that we lie about to ourselves. What do we justify in our life? And so we're going to have symbols coming up. Last series, we had icons that kind of represented those lies that we tell about God. And in this series, we're going to have different symbols that are going to be putting up. And they're going to be math symbols because it's kind of a universal language, if you will. And so this one is the not equal to, and this is the not. This is the lie that involves not. So to set it up, I have to tell you, before I get into the lie, unless you've already read it in your bulletin, because y'all are awesome and you always read your bulletin, I have to tell you a little bit about my call story in order to get into this lie. So I mentioned to you before that when I was younger, I knew everything that I wanted to be in life. It was like several different things, but the one thing that was certain is that I didn't want to be a pastor. I've shared that with y'all before. Like, I wanted to be so many things, but I did not want to be a pastor. And it always changed, but I did not want to be a pastor. Never changed. Until God called me into ministry, or what I thought God called me into ministry. It actually happened whenever I was serving in a pastoral internship, which is something that our conference supports. It was the second year that it had ever existed, so we're still kind of a guinea pig. And I was appointed in Livingston, Texas. And I was exposed to a pastor who was not like my father, because my father is very reverent and together and says everything correctly. And as you've learned in the last 5 minutes of being here, I do not. And so my understanding of a pastor was very much in this section over here. And so therefore, I am not called to do said things. And so when I got placed in Livingston with a pastor named Reverend Mak Percival, he is completely like out over there on the other side of the spectrum as far as compared to my father, as far as behavior and style. And so I was exposed to, there are different types of pastors. Okay. And it was actually a UM Army that I felt that I was serving at with the students that I had felt called to ministry full time. It wasn't a particular sermon. It wasn't anything specific. It was just a calling that I felt in my life. And I could not wait to tell my father, who is a Methodist pastor. I could not wait to tell him in my early 20s that your daughter, the youngest of 3, is going to make you proud, Father, because I feel called to become a pastor and to step into ministry. And I was so excited to tell him. I couldn't wait to get home and see his face. And you know, I tell him, and I'm prepared, and I tell him, and his response is, "Oh, that's great, honey." What? Like, hello, your crazy wild child with purple hair and tattoos and piercings just told you that she wanted to go full-time into ministry. And you're like, like, really? Like, come on, give me something here. And I'm like, maybe he doesn't believe me. And so, okay, so I waited a couple days and mentioned it again. And he's like, that's great. Yep, that's good. What do you mean it's good? I'm about to, like, don't you think you'd be proud that your daughter is, like, following in your footsteps? Like, you think you'd be like, oh, I'm so proud that of my 3 children, like, here's one who's passing on the tradition. She's going to be a 3rd generation. No, nothing. None of that. And it made me mad. I'm going to be honest, it made me a little mad. And I started to question my calling. And I actually, after graduation, and decided that instead of coming home to where all the churches were saying, hey, we'd love to hire you as a student pastor, we'd love to take you full time, we'd love to have that, and you would think that you'd want a job right out of college, right, parents? How many of you would love for your college student to have a job, right? Yeah, college students, how many of you would like to have an offer for a full-time job, like, before you right? So I did what anyone would do, and I said no. And I decided to instead to move to Alaska, which is the farthest away that I could find and afford from where people were saying and calling me to serve, because I thought that I could run away from God. That's a whole nother story. But what happens when I'm in Alaska is I'm like, fine, if I'm not going to be a pastor, then I'll do this, and we'll see if my family enjoys me living in Alaska. And so my father comes up to Alaska with my mom. They go on a cruise, and they stop at the port that I'm working at, and it kind of left my mind of how I felt called to ministry, and we were at the end of one of the tours that I did. I went to school for theater arts acting, and so I was hired to do a lot of tourism there. And at the end of one of our tours, my dad was just so beaming, and he was so excited, and he was just so proud of me. And I'm like, how are you so proud of me right now? Especially because I was fully dressed. This is a disclosure. I was fully dressed as a madam. I worked in a brothel as a tour guide. Like, I'm fully clothed, okay? But it's like historic brothel, and that's what your daughter works in a brothel, and you are proud. Okay, and he was just so, this is my daughter, I'm so excited. I'm like, what? Okay, I can't contain it. What is the deal? Like, why is this worthy, but being a pastor is not worthy? Like, being called to ministry is not worthy. And my wise father, with all of his just reverence, just says, oh, baby, you don't need a title to do ministry. You've been doing ministry your whole life. We're called to do ministry as Christians. But if you feel called to take the vocation of ministry, I could not want anything more than you if that's what God calls you to do in your life. I want you to do what God calls you to do in life and accept that calling. I just didn't want to give you my expression and for you to live off of my expression. I wanted you to live off of God's calling in your life. But don't be fooled. You've been doing ministry here, even though you're not associated with a church. I've seen you talk to people. I've seen you minister to them, and I've seen you witness to them. You don't have to have the vocation in ministry to be a minister. Changed my life. Changed my life completely. It flipped it upside down, that I was fighting for something that was already there, and it completely flipped my understanding of ministry, and it has fulfilled me ever since. So I tell you that story because our lie that we tell ourselves this morning, that I told myself, I may be called to the vocation of ministry, but like my father told me, and I think is relevant for all of us, is that as Christians, we are all called to ministry, and we are all called to be ministers. And so our lie that we're talking about this morning is the lie that I am not called to ministry. That's what we tell ourselves, and that's what some of you are still saying right now, and you're still going to say it halfway through the sermon, that, oh, no, not me. I am not called to ministry. That word is not associated in my vocabulary. Well, we'll see about that. So we're going to go to our scripture, which is 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 4 through 5. 4 through 10 is a great chunk, and if I had more time, I would go over it, but I know that I would go over it, so we're not. So we're going to do 4 through 5, and then we're going to park here, and I'm going to break this down because I enjoyed this way too much. So hear the word. As you come to him, the living stone, rejected by humans, but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood. A holy what? I'm sorry, what was that? Okay. Offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. So some of you are like, oh, where are you going with this? Well, I'm so glad you asked. So if we break this down, and again, I wish I had more time. I love the analogy, the metaphors that St. Peter is using here. If you notice a lot of the words up there, that imagery that he's starting to use, you see stone, living stone, built house, right? This kind of analogy of a building and a place. And so there's two reasons why St. Peter does that. One is that he knows that's awkward. I was like, oh. One is that he knows who he's speaking to. He knows, and he, just like Jesus did. Jesus used parables, and he spoke in a language that's familiar. He's speaking in a familiar language because this is something that they exactly understood as far as building goes. They knew how difficult it was to make a brick, and that you have to use the right sand and the right mixture with the right water and letting it sit. And that placement of these bricks were crucial, and the labor behind it and location of it that, not necessarily as relevant to us today, but it was exactly what was relevant to the people of this time. And so he's speaking to them, because it's familiar to them, but he also is using this imagery because, and he references it later when he quotes Isaiah, because Isaiah uses his references a lot, is that he's not just talking about building or any building. If you see there, it says he's referring to a spiritual house. And it's specific in Greek that it's spiritual house. It's not a temple or church, right? It's spiritual house for a reason. But to them, they think that he's just trying to use a synonym for the word temple. And to them, temple that was the holiest of holies for them, the temple in Jerusalem. That was the place where they went to meet God. That was the place where the priesthood would make sacrifices on behalf of them for the atonement of sins. This was a place that was just crucial for their existence. It was a symbol of freedom. The temple, that building was a symbol of hope to people, right? So this is why he's using this word and this analogy of a building and building up with stones, is because he's trying to show them about this symbol of hope. Are you with me? Yeah. Okay, 3 of you. So then, if we move on, we have to see who he's talking to. And at the very beginning it says, as you come to him, the living stone, to Jesus, rejected by humans, but chosen by God, and you're precious to him. That's not just referring to Jesus. It's also referring to who was rejected by humans at the time. Besides God, it was a group of people. The Gentiles. So remember, the Jews were God's chosen people. And this is a whole new concept when Jesus came, because he was like, oh, no, this is for everybody, right? So Peter is reiterating that. He's saying that this is the people who are rejected. These humans were rejected, but they are now chosen by God, and they're precious to them. That's giving them purpose, and it's giving them an identity. So Peter is being clear that what I'm talking about here is not just for the Jews. This is for Jews and for Gentiles. This is for everyone. So we know who he's talking to. We know what he's talking about and why he's talking about. Now let's see what he gets to, which is he's calling them to be this spiritual house, not a temple, but a spiritual house. What Peter is doing is he's explaining to them that you as individuals are about to come together as a community. Imagine if I were laying bricks up here. If I started putting you as a person, you're starting to build this foundation. When he's saying that they're about to start building of this spiritual house, he's telling them that you are about to build the church. And it's not a building. And this was like to them, right? Because the temple is the holiest of holies. He's like, no. This is different. You are about to be unified together, and you're building a spiritual house. You're the church. You are about to be the body. He's trying to explain to them what Jesus said and what Jesus was doing. And then he goes in to say exactly what does it mean to be a spiritual house, and what do you do? What do we do as a church? And it says to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices. And so I know a lot of you are like, well, what does it mean to be a holy priesthood? The priesthood was called to keep the temple. They were called to do the sacraments, and it's to do the sacrifices. And it says that you're supposed to offer up spiritual sacrifices, meaning no longer lambs and calves and animals and things like that. But we're not doing the blood sacrifices anymore because Jesus gave his blood sacrifice. We are now living sacrifices. We talk about that in Romans. We are now living our life as a sacrifice. You are called to be that sacrifice, that spiritual sacrifice. So as a priesthood, he's saying that that's what the priests were responsible for in that building. You are now the priest. Boom! Scripture just told you called to ministry. That's what that means. That means that you are called to be a minister. You with me? That's what he's telling them. There's no longer this separation and this special whatever. He's saying, no. You are supposed to do this. You, as a whole body, are supposed to be the change in the world. You are supposed to give the love. And not just you on your own, but at the very end it says, to God through Jesus Christ. is 2 verses, and it's just packed with how crucial it is, that how specific Peter is trying to be with them and how he's trying to reach them. He's trying to set up to them like, listen, I need your ears so that you can hear. I need to tell you something. I got to flip things for you. You're going to be the church. And like the temple was a sign of hope for the people in Jerusalem, he's saying, no. Now you are called to be the church, and now you are called to be a sign of hope. And friends, if we're called to be ministers, and if we're called to be a sign of hope, then that means we need to give hope. Amen? Are we giving it? So let's lead into some of those lies that we give and that we tell ourselves to prevent us from being in our holy priesthood. So one of the lies in this section is what I'm going to call the I can't lies, because we convince ourselves that I just can't do that. One of them I hear a lot is that, I can't do ministry. I can't serve. I have no talents. I don't sing or teach or preach or play an instrument. Where is it in the Bible? I could be wrong. I'm not. Where is it in the Bible that does it say that the only way to, or the only talents to offer to God is through singing or preaching or playing an instrument? Like, what chapter is that? And why do we park on that? Because we all have this assumption like, I can't get up and speak, and I can't get up and sing, and I can't, so therefore I don't have any talents that the church wants. Wrong. I assure you that is far from wrong. And we hide behind that lie. We kind of justify our fear a little bit. But God has given you talents. Oh, God has given you talents. Some of you know them, but some of us need to find what those talents are. And more importantly, we need to find how we can better serve the church with them. Right? And so a lot of it's not always up front. Some of you have the talent of administration. We need help in administration in our church. We need reception volunteers. Some of you have the gift of prayer. We have a prayer team. We have an entire church of broken needs that you could be a part of by praying. Some of you are like, I don't do the whole person thing and whatever. I'm more of like an outdoorsy kind of a guy. Great, we have a Mo team. We just happen to have a Mo team that you can be a part of and that you can serve on, right? We have, and some of you may be blessed with finances, right? You may be blessed with finances. There are so many needs within our church. You could donate scholarships for students. You could pay for children's tuition at our day school. You could pay for things specifically or just in general. Like, there are so many gifts and talents that we have, and it's our responsibility to figure out what has God blessed me with and how can I give that back to God. So we have to remove that lie from ourselves that I can't do it because I don't have talents. It's our responsibility to find our talents and find a place for them in ministry. And another I can't is, I get this one a lot, which is, I don't know the Bible well enough to do ministry. Have you all ever said that before? I don't know the Bible enough to lead. You lie. Oh, thank you. One of us is going to heaven. I'm just kidding. So we tell ourselves that if I knew more Scripture, then I would serve more. Like, if I knew more, I feel a little bit more confident, and then I can do God's work. And again, you know what? That's great. We have a whole lifetime to read the Bible, and we should take our whole lifetime to read the Bible and continually learn and soak up in that knowledge. But in the meantime, why don't we just join a small group and we can grow in discipleship and in ministry with people, and in the meantime, do ministry while we're learning the Bible. You can totally do both at the same time. We're actually called to. You can do ministry and still be learning in the Bible. And it just so happens, this is crazy, that we actually are going to be studying the Bible. We're going to be having Bible boot camp in the fall. Sign up for that. If you're in a small group, we've asked small groups to continue their night, but to come as a bigger group to make it more inviting for those of us who don't have small groups. It's a little intimidating to join small groups. It's a new kind of culture for some of us. So join one. So if you're not in a small group, this is a perfect time for you to do so. Here's a great opportunity for you to learn the Bible and to get to know it deeper. But you can still do ministry in the meantime. Don't wait until you think you need to have the Bible memorized, because you will spend your entire life and never serve God. You can spend your entire life reading the Bible, but never loving God. Do you hear me? All right. So those are the I can'ts, and then we also do the we can't. And so what those really are is we can't do this because I just don't feel equipped. That's what that those mean. They mean I just don't feel equipped. I don't have the tools that are necessary, the means that are necessary, the talents that are necessary, the knowledge that are necessary. And we use those I can't lies to justify that I'm just not equipped enough. But if you remember, and you've probably heard this before, that God doesn't only call the equipped, but God always equips the called. Right? I mean, the Bible is filled with that. There's so many examples, like David and Goliath. Like David's a little kid, and he's facing Goliath, a giant that's named Goliath, and all that he has is a slingshot. Right? And like all these grown men are terrified to take on Goliath, and this kid takes him out with a slingshot because God calls him to, and he says, okay. And because of that, he saved a nation. There's another story. We have Moses. Moses, who is called to be the voice for the Hebrews, even and go against Pharaoh, which is where he grew up. He grew up as a son of Pharaoh with the Egyptians. He's called to be the voice of the Hebrews, and he stutters. He has a speech impediment. But God gives him Aaron to speak on his behalf at times. But Moses still answered his calling. And Moses delivered them out of slavery. He saved a nation. Right? Noah was called to build an ark. He wasn't a carpenter. He wasn't a zoologist. He wasn't a sailor. He wasn't a boat builder. Like those weren't any of the things that he planned on doing in his life. But God called him to do that, which was crazy to him. And he did it. And because he did it, he didn't just save a nation. He saved humanity. Because God called him and he said yes. Esther was called, culture told her she was a beauty queen. You're just meant to be a beautiful thing in this palace. But God called her to use more than her beauty and to do more than just that. And because she said, I'm not just going to hide behind my beauty, because of that, Esther, because she was placed in the palace, because of her beauty, used her position in her place to save a nation. So you see, these people didn't dream of this. This wasn't their plan their whole life. They didn't plan on taking on a giant and a flood and the Egyptians and an entire palace. This wasn't their plan. It's not what they asked for. They weren't equipping themselves for that, but God equipped them for it. And God called them to it. And the same goes for us, because I know a lot of you are like, Mac, that's so great, but that was in the Bible. And I just can't see myself being called to that. And that's when we start switching over from the I can't lie to, and I'm going to be really honest with you here. I hope I don't ruffle feathers. I'm going to be really honest with you. We start moving from the I can't into the I won't. We do. We might phrase it differently. We might a little sugarcoat it, but really what we're saying is, I won't do this. We don't want to admit that, but for example, one of the I won't lies, what it really means is I won't, is we'll say things like, someone else will do it. Someone else will step up and do that. See, that's not I can't. That's just I won't. Do you hear what I'm saying? But we just phrase it differently, and we lie to ourselves and say that, there's 300 of us here, so they only need 10 people to serve for communion. Someone else will step up to it, right? So-and-so always, leads that event, so they'll do it. These certain families always help during Family Promise, so it always gets taken care of every time it's here, so they don't really, I don't need to. And what we're saying is, I won't. And what happens when we do that is, we are missing out on an opportunity where God is calling us to do something. Someone might step up and do it, but the difference is that God is calling you to do it. And when we miss out on what God is calling us to do in our life, guys, then we are missing out on growth. And we are missing out on those prayers that we're asking God to help us with. God, help me with this in my life. Help me grow in this area. Father, help me to become happier. Help me to become, here's an opportunity where he's trying to give that to you, but we turn it down because it doesn't look like. We just wanted it handed to us. We don't want to do the work involved that happens with a change in our life, right? But when we miss those opportunities and we just push them and we just, someone else will do it, we're saying I won't. That's exactly what we needed to do, what God was trying to give us in our life so that we can grow in the way that we've been praying to grow. One of my favorite that I get all the time, which is really hard to hear as a pastor, is this is the I won't lie, is that's not my job. That's the pastor's job. That's the youth director's job or the children's director. That's not my job. So we get confused on vocation in ministry, and we think that that's just someone else's responsibility. We think that God totally agrees with the lines that we have set as culture as far as job responsibility goes. Him in this little box instead of vice versa in a bird's view, and that's not my job. That's someone else's job to do that. I want to read to you, and you know this, but I'm going to read it because maybe you don't. I was sharing this with my students recently. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. So you've probably heard it, but I'm going to read it to you. I purposely didn't put it on the screen because I want you to hear. So just then, a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. He said, "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And he was trying to trick Jesus, right? The Pharisees do this all the time. Like, "Oh, Jesus, Son of God, riddle me this," right? And so they were always trying to catch him in a lie or in a fault. And so Jesus responds with, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" And so the lawyer answers him, and he says that you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, "You've given the right answer. Do this and you will live." But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" See, we want Jesus to tell us who our neighbor is. We want Jesus to tell us who we're supposed to love, who gets to be in the in crowd. I'm going to step on some toes here in a little bit. You better get ready. Okay. So he continues on, and Jesus replies, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell into the hands of a robber, who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. And now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise, as a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near, and when he saw him, he was moved to pity." Remember, at this time, a Samaritan was not friends of the Jews. So saying the word Samaritan, let's insert a word here. You choose within your heart. Choose a word or a type of person in our culture today that people exile, that people are not okay with. Okay, so let's get real here. So instead of, but a Samaritan came traveling, it would be someone like, and Jesus specifically chooses someone that they don't like. So instead of Samaritan, you could put homosexual. You could put transgender. You could put Democrat or Republican or Green Party or Tea Party. Put whatever you want. Are you with me? Or yes? That's what Jesus was doing. This is how radical he was. He was like stepping on top, just boom, off the bat. It was like, and here's this person that our culture says that we are not, that's not our neighbor. They're not allowed. Those are sinners. They're not allowed into this secret club. And that's who he says does this. He says that the Samaritan, he went to him, he bandaged this guy's wounds, he poured oil and wine on them, and then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, took care of him, and the next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back, I'll repay you whatever more you spend." So he doesn't just do something in the moment. He continually helps this person. That's ministry. And this is my favorite part, and we pass this up. This is how crazy, as I love to tell students, this is how radical Jesus was. We stop there, but this is what Jesus says at the end. "Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers?" And the lawyer responds, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said to him, "So you should go and do likewise." Jesus makes the Pharisee who's trying to trip him up and make Jesus specifically give him labels of who's not on the in crowd, he makes the Pharisee then say who was the good neighbor. He makes him say, this person that I don't like, the Samaritan, was the one who was being a good neighbor. But now I ask you this, to go back to this lie of whose job was it to take care of that Samaritan? Because a priest passed him up. A Levite passed him up. Whose job was it to take care of this person? That's what we do, friends. We have ministry moments and we pass them because that's someone else's job. Here's the person that everyone hates is the one who, it wasn't his job. And if anything, he was going to be hated for it. But he did it because he was called to do it. I think we're missing out on the growth that we pray for in our life if we're missing out on these relationships that could be built within ourselves. We say it's not the job. We say it's not for us to do. We lie to ourselves. But, in reality, we have this ability to have ministry moments. And this is what it means to be a ministry, people. You're presented with a ministry moment. For example, Meredith Lewis was presented with a ministry moment whenever at family retreat, someone said, hey, you know what? My kids are in theater, and they love it. And we have a lot of kids that are in theater, but the theater here, they're just not really all that, they're not really family-friendly and Christian values, And she heard that. She has a talent within theater. She let that ministry moment set into her. She prayed about it. That becomes ministry in the making. And then she brought it to me. She brought it to the church and said, hey, been thinking about this, been praying about this. I want to help lead a pageant, a Christmas pageant, for the children and students to be a part of. Not just you should do this, it's your job. It's I want to be a part of doing this. And now it becomes ministry in motion. We're having a Christmas pageant this year. Chris Foss heard through our survey that as a church, the Reveal survey, that we struggled in scripture knowledge. And he said, that was a ministry moment. And he started making it ministry in the making because he was praying about it and thinking about it. And because he has written a Bible study. And so he brings it forth to the staff and to Matt. And now it's ministry in motion because now we're having Bible boot camp that was written by one of our very own members. Lindsay Searden has the gift of knitting. And she's been hearing about one of our students who is in rehab. He doesn't get to receive gifts and items and money. And because she has the gift of knitting, she decided to knit him this blanket because it's one of the only personal items they can have. And she picks the colors that he liked. And she wrote this card for him. And so she uses this ministry moment and she turns it into ministry in the making. And now it was ministry in motion. And it was given to Tanner. We were at Dickinson during Army. And that's actually where he's at, is in that town. That was on her own. That's not leading something. That's not having to be in charge of something. That was just personal. Ministry is all around you, and you're called to it. The number one thing that students say the most to me is, how can I get closer to God? I want to get deeper. I want to go deeper in my faith. I want to get closer. How can I do it? What can I do? And I lead into Bible studies, and I bring them on Wednesdays, and I tell them to go on Sundays. But the number one thing that I bring them to the most, the number one thing that I say, you got to go to this, you got to go to this, is Army. And the reason why it's Army, because a lot of you are like, what's so special about this Army? What's so special about this camp? You would think off the surface level, there's nothing that special. We sleep on the floor. Students pay $265 in the heat of the summer to go sleep at the floor of a church and, eat group meals and be in the hot sun and be with people they don't know. And it sounds miserable, right? But if you read the reviews, you would see that this is where they have experienced God the most. It has flipped their life. They become committed throughout the rest of the year. I've received so many emails from parents that have said, my child came back different. And they've been to church camp. This is different. There's something different about them. And there's no secret thing that happens at Army. We have the same worship leader. We have the same boring speakers. We sing the same songs. There's nothing that's special about it except one thing. It's not all revolved around ministry being done to them. It's revolved around them doing ministry to the community. Do you hear me? That's the difference. It's because they're doing ministry and they're not just being ministered to at Army. They're doing work in the community and they're loving on people. And when you do ministry, it changes you. It grows you in discipleship. I directly see this change in people. So I ask you, Parkway, do you come here to be ministered to? Or do you come here to do ministry? That's the question we got to ask ourselves. And that's the lie that we got to break down in our life. Is we come here as consumers. And sometimes we need to just come and receive. Oh, but there's a time when we need to take turns. And then sometimes it's our turn to step up and find out, where am I called to do ministry? Because hear it from me, so it took me a long time to hear it from my father. You may not be called to be a pastor of a church. You may not be called into student ministry or children's ministry. You may not be called to be a worship leader, but you are called to be a Christian. And as Christians, we are called to be ministers. We are called to go out into the world. And we are called to love the least, the last, and the broken. We are called to do ministry. Called to be a priesthood. So where's your ministry at Parkway? Where's your ministry in your life? You pray with me?